Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra and compare it against the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra and see which specific phone is the better one for you. Now, I will definitely tell you, you can't really go wrong with either one of these phones. Both these devices are very, very good. I've seen so many people already talk about these two devices, and I'll definitely tell you, when it comes down to these two, this is probably, in my opinion, a small upgrade coming from the outside. From the exterior, there's not too many changes, but the interior, there is actually a pretty big change here that we kind of have to discuss. So if you want to pick up either one of these phones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, like I said, if you already have the Galaxy S22 Ultra, just keep that phone. There is absolutely no reason to go up to something like an S23 Ultra, but maybe if you have an even older phone, the S23 Ultra might seem like a better deal in some ways. Now on the outside, the S22 Ultra had that 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display, and it was a 1440p panel. Now for me personally, this was a really, really good display. This was an amazing display, probably one of the best ones Samsung ever made, and it was kind of like this curved display, which was nice, but the sides, like the top and bottom, were actually flat. So it didn't curve like a lot of phones. It was almost like a rectangle, but it looked very good. I actually like this design a lot, and if you're somebody who plays a lot of games, any controllers that you use or whatnot actually kind of fit flush against the side of this phone, which looked really good. So it's 120 Hz, it's a very good display, probably still one of the best ones you can buy. On the Galaxy S23 Ultra, it is basically the same exact display. So there are very few differences here. You're getting the same exact size, so 6.8 inches, still a dynamic island. Apparently it's a little bit brighter here and there, but not really. It's kind of hard to tell. But it's a 120 Hz panel as well. So you're really not getting too many differences on the outside here either, or at least on the front. So from the display standpoint, pretty much the same exact thing. Now they both have USB-C ports on the bottom, which is great. Both of them have the S Pen located in the exact same spot as well. So just those things right there, right? You're still getting the S Pen, you're still getting the USB-C port, no extra ports or no extra, SD card slots, nothing like that. You're still getting the same display. And just those things in and of itself would make you think that they would probably change something else on the outside, right? And that is not the case either. On the back of these two phones, and basically the exact same camera setup as well. Now I think the S23 Ultra is clearly going to have the better camera, but it's still very interesting when Samsung makes phones like these. Typically, they do make some pretty big differences from one generation to the other. We take a look at something like the S23s from the S22s. That was kind of a difference, at least on the back. Now, with these ones, they made no difference, which was very interesting. I thought they would do something, but I guess that it is what it is. Now, on the back, you're still getting the frosted glass back, which is great. You're still getting wireless charging, reverse wireless charging, IP certification. You're still getting a lot of stuff on both these phones, which is great. However, I will say, if you already have the S22 Ultra, going up to something like an S23 Ultra really doesn't make any sense to me at all, and I would probably just recommend keeping that phone. But if you really like the S23 Ultra and you like the other things about that phone, then by all means definitely go for it. Now another big thing I want to state is not really on the exterior, but in the storage variants, we are now getting basically twice the amount of base storage depending on the model that you get. So the S23 Ultra now starts at 256 gigabytes, where the S22 Ultra actually started at 128. You can still spec them out to have the highest variant whichever way you want to, but that is probably a big thing to keep in mind, is that now you can go ahead and get twice the amount of base storage if you really want to, which is really cool. Now on the camera side, there are actually some very interesting changes here. So we're getting the same type of camera setup for the most part. So on the Galaxy S22 Ultra, we're getting a 108 megapixel wide-angle lens, 10 megapixel periscope telephoto lens, a 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. With the Galaxy S23 Ultra, we are now getting a 200 megapixel wide-angle lens, so that's a bit of an increase, a 10 megapixel periscope telephoto lens, a 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. So the main camera, the wide-angle lens, has now gone up from 108 megapixels to 200 megapixels, but also another big thing is on the front camera. Funny enough, we had a 40 megapixel wide-angle camera on the S22 Ultra. We now have a 12 megapixel wide-angle camera on the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Now it is a dual pixel lens, so that's kind of a big thing to keep in mind, but it is actually pretty crazy to me that Samsung's kind of went down in the megapixel count on the front camera, but that's totally okay. 12 megapixels in my opinion is perfect, and that's kind of what it should be. Now you're still getting 8K capability on the back, still getting 4K at 60 on the front, but the 8K can now shoot in 30 frames per second, whereas before it was 24 frames per second. And I'll definitely say, the features between both are great. You're really not missing out on any crazy features between one or the other. And that is the one thing I keep kind of looking back between these two phones. from one generation to the other, there might be some numbers that increase and whatnot, but you're basically getting almost the exact same phone. Like, it's the exact same capability, and that's kind of what to kind of keep in mind. Like, you wouldn't really go from one phone to the other just because of the performance or anything like that between here. But in this case, the cameras are better, but I think they're about the same thing. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, in terms of software and longevity, this is kind of an important thing. Like, the Galaxy S23 Ultra will outlast the S22 Ultra. Is it going to be a big difference? Probably not. It's going to be about a year. So if that's a big deal to you, then clearly go for the S23 Ultra. But I think for a majority of people out there, they're probably going to be okay with something like the S22 Ultra, even though it's not going to be giving them the full, lifespan compared to the S23 Ultra. Now, moving on to probably one of my favorite things, the performance side. So last year, the S22 Ultra, it did come out with that Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset inside. Now, personally, I think that chipset was pretty good. Unfortunately, it really wasn't as optimized for the battery life standpoint, and it overheated the phone a lot and all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, we do have that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset, which is supposed to be fixing up a lot of those issues that we had before. Now, I just ran a battery comparison, not between the S20 Ultras, but between the S22 and the S23 and some other phones, and the difference between the S22 and the S23 based on those chipsets, it was a pretty big difference. So now with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, you should expect to see much better battery life, and that is something that I actually love seeing. When we had these types of devices, when I look back, it's just something that I kind of think back to, and I'm like, well, the performance of those phones were pretty good, but they just weren't as optimized in those specific standpoints, and that's kind of expected. So now with something like the Galaxy S23 Ultra, not only will you get a faster chipset, it's going to be more optimized, and those games that you play or those emulators that you play are going to be able to play them at higher capacities and spending basically less battery life. At least that's as far as I can tell. Now, in the RAM standpoint, they still start at 8 gigabytes of RAM. They can go up to 12 gigs of RAM on each model. But I will tell you, with the S22 Ultra, a very, very good performing phone. That's still one of the best performing phones you can buy nowadays. I do think, though, with the S23 Ultra, if you're playing low-intensive games, high-intensive games, if you're doing basic applications, you're going to be getting probably a better experience overall from something like the S23 Ultra, but it's going to be such a slight difference that I don't even think a majority of people would probably even, care about it, in my opinion. So from that standpoint, that kind of covers it up there. They both have the 5,000 mAh batteries inside, so it's really not even that big of a difference here either. They're probably going to be getting roughly the same amount of battery life, but depending on the usage, I would probably err on the side of the S23 Ultra and getting the better, battery life overall. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I would definitely tell you is I definitely do think the Galaxy S23 Ultra is probably the better phone here, but it's really not it's not as big of a difference as some of you may think. So if you currently can get a good deal on an S22 Ultra, or if it's not that expensive around you, or whatever the case is, then I would 100% recommend just going down that direction. That makes the most amount of sense to me personally than going for something like the S23 Ultra. I think the 23 Ultra is a great phone. It's one of the best phones you can buy now. But I think the 22 Ultra is still pretty good. And if you don't mind the weirdness of the H Gen 1 chipset sometimes, I think that's a tremendous phone for sure. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.